You're in the kitchen. The refrigerator hums. The clock on the microwave reads something in the evening. You don't look closely. You've eaten today. Maybe you skipped lunch. Maybe you didn't. Either way, your body is asking, with that low and familiar pull below your ribs, that it's time again. You open the fridge. You close it. You're not hungry enough for effort. It doesn't seem like an important moment. It's the most ordinary thing a person can do. Stand in a kitchen and decide not to eat quite yet. Nothing marks it as a beginning. Nothing tells you this is the last meal your body expects to receive. But your body is already counting. It has been counting since the last thing you swallowed. And from this moment forward, from this small, unremarkable decision in a quiet kitchen, something begins. A cascade you can't see or feel yet. A sequence your body has rehearsed for millions of years. This is what it actually feels like to starve. Hour 6 arrives the way most emergencies do. Quietly, and then all at once. For the first several hours, nothing unusual happens. Your body is processing what you last ate, pulling energy from the glycogen stored in your liver and muscles. Broken down into glucose, distributed to your cells, 25% of it reserved exclusively for your brain. The machinery is running smoothly. You feel normal. A little tired, maybe. But normal. And then the tanks run low. You feel it first as irritability, a sharpness at the edges of everything. A conversation that annoys you more than it should, a sound that feels louder than it is. Physiologists call this the hangry state, but the word undersells it. What you're experiencing is your brain signaling with increasing urgency that the energy supply is becoming unreliable. Your glycogen stores deplete between 6 and 8 hours after your last meal, faster if you've been active, slower if you were still. And when they do, something changes. The hunger isn't just uncomfortable now, it's directional. Your stomach contracts in waves. A low ache below the sternum that arrives, peaks and eases, arrives, peaks and eases, like a tide. Ghrelin, the hormone your gut releases when it wants you to eat, floods your bloodstream in pulses. Your brain receives the signal and amplifies it. Everything narrows toward food. The smell of someone else's dinner 3 apartments away reaches you and produces something close to grief. This is the first phase. It will not last. 24 hours in, something unexpected happens. The hunger stops. Not because you've eaten. Not because your body has decided you don't need food, but because your body has changed strategy. You have entered a metabolic state called ketosis. When glucose is unavailable, your liver begins converting stored fat into compounds called ketone bodies, short-chain molecules that can cross the blood-brain barrier and serve as an alternative fuel. Your brain, which had been running on glucose, begins to switch its energy source. The process is imperfect. Ketones can only supply approximately 75% of your brain's requirements, and the transition isn't smooth, but it works well enough to keep you functional, well enough to keep you alive. The hunger pangs ease. The waves stop. This is not relief. This is your body cutting off the alarm because the alarm is no longer useful. You notice other things now. A faint, metallic taste in your mouth. A slightly sweet quality to your breath. A byproduct of the ketones your lungs are beginning to exhale. Your awareness feels strangely sharpened, almost uncomfortably so. Researchers studying extended fasting frequently document this. A period of unusual cognitive clarity before the decline. Your ancestors would have recognized it. For hundreds of thousands of years, a clear and focused mind was most necessary at exactly this moment, when food had run out and survival depended on finding more. Your body is not surrendering. It is preparing you to hunt, but you don't hunt. There is no prey to find, no field to cross. And the clarity, without anywhere to go, slowly begins to feel like a frequency without a signal, a radio searching for a station. By day 2, the sensation has become something quieter and stranger, a kind of dimming that you can't quite locate. You know you're less than you were. You can't say how. By 72 hours, a new threshold is crossed. Your fat stores are still available, still producing ketones. But the demand for glucose, from your brain, from your red blood cells, from tissues that cannot run on fat at all, exceeds what ketosis can supply. And so, your body makes a decision that it has made many times in human history, under siege and famine and isolation and disaster. It begins to consume itself. The process is called proteolysis. Your body breaks down skeletal muscle into amino acids, which the liver then converts into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. Every gram of muscle your body dismantles produces energy. It is a brutal calculation. Sacrifice the structure to power the engine. Lose the limbs to preserve the core. In 1944, the physiologist Dr. Ansel Keys and his colleagues at the University of Minnesota enrolled 36 conscientious objectors in one of the most rigorous studies of human starvation ever conducted. For 6 months, the men ate approximately half their normal caloric intake. Not full starvation, but controlled and measured deprivation. The goal was to understand what happened to the human body and mind when food became chronically insufficient. The results changed the science of nutrition. They also documented something that no metabolic chart can capture. The men became different people, not just thinner, not just weaker, different. Within weeks, they had become obsessed with food in a way that felt pathological to everyone around them and inevitable to themselves. They cut their food into tiny pieces and ate in elaborate rituals that stretched a meal over an hour. They collected recipes. They studied cookbooks with the intensity they had previously reserved for literature and philosophy. They dreamed about food. Some of them, in their journal entries, described the dreams as the best part of their days. Their personalities changed. Men who had been optimistic became irritable and withdrawn. Men who had been social became isolated. Depression moved through the group like weather. Several men reported feeling as though they were watching themselves from a distance, as though the self that had existed before the experiment was still present, somewhere, but increasingly difficult to access. Dr. Keys documented what he called semi-starvation neurosis, a clinical name for something the men experienced as the dissolution of who they were. You are not in an experiment. There is no observation. There is only this: a body eating itself and a mind that is beginning to lose its footing. By the end of the second week, your physical deterioration becomes visible. Your face changes first, not just thinner, but different in character. The fat pads beneath your cheekbones diminish. The skin around your eyes loses its fullness. You look like someone who has been through something. Your muscles have been losing mass steadily, unevenly. The body prioritizing the largest reserves, stripping tissue from places you don't notice until you try to stand from a chair and discover a weakness that wasn't there before. Your immune system is now compromised, not dramatically. There is no sudden collapse, but the low-level maintenance that keeps opportunistic infections at bay, that monitors for cellular anomalies, that repairs small damages before they become large ones, all of it is underfunded. Your body is redirecting resources toward survival, and survival at this stage looks like keeping your heart beating, your lungs moving, your brain minimally powered. Everything else is secondary. Everything else waits. By the third week, the body is in late-stage starvation. Every major organ system is affected. Your heart muscle, which is muscle, has been losing mass alongside your skeletal tissue. The heart compensates by slowing. Your resting heart rate drops. Your blood pressure falls. The organ that has beaten without pause since before you were born is now working with diminished architecture, keeping rhythm as best it can. The 1981 Irish hunger strike produced the most precisely documented cases of human starvation in modern Western history. 10 men died. Bobby Sands died after 66 days. Kieran Doherty lasted 73. The doctors who attended them documented the progression. Early weeks of maintained consciousness and physical dignity, middle weeks of accelerating decline, final days characterized by organ failure, near blindness, loss of speech, hallucinations. 66 days, 73 days. The numbers are vast and impossible, and yet the body that arrived at day 66 was not the same body that began on day 1. It had cannibalized most of what it began with. It had dismantled itself piece by piece to power itself for one more day, and one more day, and one more day, using the building blocks of its own existence as fuel. At the end, the heart fails. Not because it stops trying, because there is nothing left to try with. Now comes the part the science books rarely include. There is a particular cruelty built into the physiology of starvation that was not fully understood until the 20th century. It concerns what happens not at the end of starvation, but at the beginning of recovery. Refeeding syndrome says, during prolonged starvation, your body's stores of phosphate, potassium, and magnesium become critically depleted. The cells adapt to this depletion. They rearrange their mechanisms around the absence. Your system reaches a new equilibrium, fragile and dangerous, but stable. And then food arrives. The moment carbohydrates enter your bloodstream, your pancreas responds with a surge of insulin. Insulin drives glucose into your cells, and it brings phosphate and potassium and magnesium with it, pulling them rapidly from the bloodstream into the cells. The serum levels of these electrolytes crash. Phosphate is the precursor to ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the molecule your cells use as energy currency. Without phosphate, cells cannot produce ATP. Without ATP, your heart cannot contract properly. The arrhythmia begins. The heart, which survived 60 days of starvation, cannot survive the first meal. This is refeeding syndrome. People who have endured extreme starvation have died, not from hunger, but from eating. The rescue becomes the danger. The return becomes the next threshold. Dr. Alan Shenkin, professor of clinical chemistry at the University of Liverpool, documented cases in the 1990s that formalized protocols for feeding starving patients slowly, with electrolyte monitoring, with careful management of the biochemical transition from depletion to repletion. The protocol exists because the alternative, feeding someone who is starving as quickly as you want to feed them, kills them. Survival is more complicated than simply receiving what was missing. Across the history of human religion and philosophy, extended fasting was never seen as simple deprivation. It was seen as a threshold. 40 days in the desert, the vision quests of indigenous North American traditions, the days of Ramadan approaching their final nights, the Jewish Yom Kippur fast, the Christian Lent, the Buddhist traditions of monks who ate once a day and experienced what they described as an unusual sharpness at the boundary between hunger and its absence. They were not wrong about the sharpness. The science now confirms it. During the transition into deep ketosis, before cognitive decline begins, there is a window that the monks who fasted and the mystics who went without food described as a kind of opening. The brain, stripped of its usual noise, working with unfamiliar fuel, processing reality through a different chemical lens, produces states of perception that ordinary cognition does not permit. Whether those states are enlightenment or crisis, or simply a brain doing its best with what it has left. The answer depends entirely on who you ask. What the science cannot resolve is the question that lives at the edge of all of this. Not what happens to the body when it runs out of food. That part is now well documented. But what happens to the thing inside the body that noticed the hunger? The thing that felt the waves below the sternum, that dreamed about food in an experiment in Minnesota, inches 1944, that heard the heart slow and couldn't stop it. What happens to that? The body has an exact answer to the question of starvation. The cells deplete, the systems fail, the rhythm stops. The process is measurable and repeatable and fully explained. The other part doesn't have an answer like that. You're in the kitchen. The refrigerator hums. The clock on the microwave reads something in the evening. You're standing the way you were standing at the beginning. Ordinary, unremarkable, body quietly managing the work of being alive. In this moment, without effort, your body is performing thousands of operations per second to keep you here. Cycling amino acids, balancing electrolytes, regulating the potassium and phosphate and insulin and glucose that define, in their precise and fragile ratios, the difference between a body that continues and a body that stops. You don't feel any of it. You feel only the absence. That low pull below the ribs that tells you that somewhere, miles away, the machinery is asking to be refueled. It is the most ordinary thing in the world. It is also the thing your body will do almost anything to prevent losing. This is the other side of hunger, the side that most people who have always had enough food never have to meet. The side that 750 million people alive right now know better than anything in this script can describe. The side where the body runs its most desperate calculations, and the mind begins slowly to dissolve around them, and somewhere past all of that, past the ketones and the gluconeogenesis and the refeeding and the phosphate, past the science that can measure it and the history that documented it and the monks who sought it, there is a question that starvation raises and cannot answer. What are you exactly when the body has nothing left? This is the other side.